Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. With the 4th of July in our rearview mirror, it's time to look ahead and see what the sports landscape has in store over the next hour or so, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back, and now that we could have all the fireworks and the festivities and the barbecue put aside, at least for now, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of barbecue for those out there who indulge between now and let's say Labor Day, or maybe a little bit past that, depending on where you live. But now that we got that all out of the way and we could squarely see what we have in front of us, and now with the final week of baseball, where the All-Star break will take place a week from today, and we could really get an overview of what has transpired here, not only just over the past weekend, but more so as a lot of these teams have played well over 90 games. So even though we could talk about, the first half is coming to a close, I know technically you could say it is, but we all know that that is not the case. And as far as baseball right at this very moment, I'm going to start off with the Subway Series, and I get it, it's a local flair from where I live, and with the other series that took place over the weekend, especially out in LA with the Astros, and that was a complete shock, especially what you saw there Friday night, but I'll touch on that in a little bit. But I want to kick off with the Subway Series because when we last spoke on Thursday, the Yankees were in a free fall to the point where they had lost the first 3 games of their series to Toronto at the time, and then was capped off by a sweep there on Thursday night to where they stumbled home and they opened up a series at Citi Field against the Mets, to where the Mets were looking to exact a little bit of revenge from the month prior, really 6-7 weeks prior, because that series was in the middle of May when the Mets invaded the Bronx and the Yankees took 2 out of 3. So when we take a look what happened over the weekend with those 2 teams, and I'll give you an overview of both before, or really after, I get into the series. And pretty much what we saw was obviously a ton of runs, not a lot of big-time pitching in the least. And the Mets were able to get 2 out of 3. And I looked at this series, if you listen to the podcast on Thursday, how this was going to be fortunate if the Mets came out with just 1 victory, and let alone 2. So even though they got the first 2 there Friday and Saturday, with the game 1 on Friday where they trailed pretty much throughout, down 2-0 right out of the bat with 2 home runs to start the game from Jason Dominguez and Aaron Judge back-to-back. And then Juan Soto gets a 2-run homer on a terribly misplayed ball in left field by Jason Dominguez. That was Brandon Nimmo hit a shot where he took 1 step in, then took a couple steps back, and the next thing you know, it just sailed over his head. And we know that Dominguez is not a good outfielder. Despite all the reports prior to the start of his career, everybody was thinking that this guy was going to be Mickey Mantle. Well, certainly he's not Mickey Mantle in the field. And we need to see more at the plate considering he's a switch hitter. But with the Mets tying the game, and then the Yankees then took a lead, actually had a 5-3 lead before the Mets came back, where Brett Beatty hit a home run to make it 5-4. And then the capper was Jeff McNeil, the 2-run homer in the 7th, 3-2 pitch with 2 outs. And obviously the biggest hit right there of the game, 6-5, to where Reed Garrett had to come in and not only pitch the 8th inning, but also the 9th. So he got 6 outs, and Garrett is one of those guys where you just cover your eyes and hold your breath. And he was able to do the job. So kudos to him to get the first game. And then I thought it right then and there, I said, if the Mets get 1 of the next 2, they'll be in good shape. And as they did on Saturday, they came flying out of the gate, where they got a grand slam from Nimmo to start. And the Mets were off and running at that point. Although the Yankees were game, it was 7-2 when Alonso hit the 2-run homer. It was 5-0, then 5-2, then 7-2, and then the Yankees came back to make it 7-5 before, in the bottom of the 7th, they got the 1 run, and then the capper, which was the 3-run bomb by Alonso. 2 homers, 5 RBIs in the game. Mets win 12-6. They even had to bring in Edwin Diaz because of Ryan Stanek. His 8th inning, 37 pitches. Yes, he gave up a run, but at least he was able to get out of it, instead of having Diaz to come into the bottom of the 8th, or excuse me, the top of the 8th, to finish out the mess that Stanek started. And I like Stanek as a reliever. I really do. He throws hard, but the thing is he throws straight. So he couldn't put out anybody in that 8th inning, and therefore Diaz had to come in And lucky for the Mets, even though they lost yesterday, but Diaz did not have to come in on back-to-back days. And we understand, if you watch the Mets, he's had a lot of work here recently to where in that Brewers series, he had to pitch the nightcap of that day-night doubleheader on top of having to come in on Thursday night. And the day-night doubleheader was on Wednesday. So for Diaz, he was at least had yesterday afternoon off because going to the third game where the Mets were looking for a sweep, and I thought there was no way that was going to happen. They had an opener to start with Chris Davinsky, and then they bring in Zach Pop, who obviously had no pop in his performance there yesterday. And then Brandon Waddle, also not very good. And I get it. When you're going to piecemeal it together, and because of the doubleheader there on Wednesday, they had to use an opener to start yesterday's game. And before you know it, it was 5-0 after Aaron Judge hit the 2-run homer there in the fifth. But then they clawed their way back. They got the 2-run single there by Lindor, and then it looked like they were going to at least get back in the game to the point where they had bases loaded with Hayden Senger, and it was 5-3. And what happened? He hit into a double play. All you needed was a fly ball there because then it would have got the top of the order with Starling Marte, who had a very good series. But because Senger hit into the double play and then Marte flew out, that was the inning, and that pretty much nullified which could have been a huge inning, considering it was 5-3 with nobody out and bases loaded, and then the ground ball double play killed them because then obviously they did get a run, but they got 2 outs in exchange for that, and then the fly ball by Marte, and then the killer was that in the top of the inning, the Yankees tacked on another run, which was top 7, and then you had that scenario where Juan Soto was up with Lindor on first, and I believe this was bottom 8, was it bottom 7? But whatever the inning was, for Lindor to get caught off and doubled up like that, and a great play by Cody Bellinger, no matter how you slice it. I mean, it was a line shot that was peering for not only the ground, but maybe even past Bellinger. It would have went all the way to the wall. Soto would have been at least on third, where you would have had Lindor score, but because it was a shoestring catch and then just an unbelievable throw, and remember, Bellinger's left-handed, so he had to go across his body and threw a dart to Goldschmidt at first to double off Lindor, which was a terrible base running play by Lindor, and he should know better. And we've seen some terrible base running moves throughout the course of the weekend, especially Ronnie Mauricio. I understand he got deep there on Friday with DJ LeMahieu, but then what was yesterday? The ground ball where he got frozen, and then Goldschmidt stepped on the bag and then tagged Mauricio as he was going back to first. What are we doing here? All right, young player, I get it, but still, you got to have a better sense of instincts when it comes to running the base pass, and he got caught in no man's land on a couple of occasions. So for Mauricio, he certainly has to go back to the drawing board, and at least the coaches have to work with him, Antoine Richardson, to see whether or not he could keep his eyes and even ears peeled for what's happening on the base paths. But the Yankees were able to salvage that game. And now, in a big nutshell, how you come away with this series, the Yankees have a lot of problems. And we've seen that, not necessarily just with this 6-game losing streak getting snapped yesterday. And that was a win that they needed in the worst way. Because if they would have lost that game, they were already 3 back from Toronto, who are hot as a pistol after sweeping the Yankees. They swept the Angels over the weekend. And it could have been 4 back with a Yankee loss. But as it was, there's still 3 back of the Blue Jays. But you saw a terrible feeling throughout the course of the weekend, whether it was the scenario I mentioned with Dominguez. You had Grisham boot a ball there in the 7th inning there a couple of days ago on Saturday. You had the weird, I don't even know how this happened, with Volpe throwing the ball. Now, I understand this was after the inning. This has nothing to do with the game itself, but this is just indicative of how this Yankee last few weeks have been, to where Volpe was throwing a ball to Judge as they're coming up the field, and it hit him in the eye where he got a cut. His glasses went flying. Thankfully, these sunglasses didn't break and get him in the eye. That would have been just a catastrophic injury for the Yankees, because he's the last guy that they can afford to have out of their lineup. And you had just terrible plays throughout, whether it was in the field or Yankees not being able to. Now, they got plenty of big hits, but they were unable to pitch. Just a brutal weekend. And now to add another terrible layer of icing to their just awful cake that the Yankee fans have been just trying to devour here over the last few weeks, Clark Schmidt, based on what Aaron Boone, the manager, had said, is that it's inevitable that Clark Schmidt is going to get Tommy John surgery. So that means you're not going to see him probably the end of next year. So to think, no Clark Schmidt. We know about Garrett Cole. He already had Tommy John surgery. And they've just been a mass unit with their rotation, even with their bullpen for that matter. And now it's going to have to be another situation where Marcus Stroman, who's been back now with a couple of starts, did not fare well there on Friday against the Mets. So now you have a scenario where the Yankees, they're going to go shopping, as we know. That's going to be no surprise as the trade deadline is at the end of the month. But now you're just trying to tread water here. Hopefully have a good enough week because you have the Mariners coming in and then the Cubs over the weekend. So two teams that obviously are trying to battle it out, although the Mariners more so for a wild card as they're 7 back of the Astros. And then the Cubs are in first place as they got 2 out of 3 against the Cardinals over the weekend, which was good. So the Cardinals weren't able to get any ground over the weekend. So not a cakewalk type of week or put your feet up week where you're going to have the dregs of the National or American League coming into town. So the Yankees still have their work cut out for them to at least close out this final stretch here before the All-Star break with, and of course, if you're a Yankee fan, you're going to take 4-2. Now, you'd hope for at least minimum 3-3. You do not want to lose these next 2 series. So for the Yankees right now, you're wounded. And you're just trying to get to the finish line, which would be July 13th, and then you could decompress. I understand you're going to have Aaron Judge and a couple of other Yankee All-Stars going to Atlanta for the game, but this is where you have to reset. This is where you're going to have to just grind it out for this week, try to get 2 series, that's all you can ask for, and then hope that when the Yankees regroup there the following Friday, that it's all systems go, get to the trade deadline, see who you bring in, and then take your chances from there, August, September, and then obviously into October, which they're going to make the playoffs, people. This isn't a situation where even if Toronto, they're not going to run and hide. But the Yankees, as we all know, not playing crisp, not playing good baseball at all. But maybe that win yesterday with a day off today, I believe they have a day off. They don't start that series against Seattle until tomorrow. They at least exhale and then see what they could do here to close out this week strong. As for the Mets, now they rebounded. Remember, they had not been playing well, as you know, losing a ton of series, losing many games in a row. They got swept in Pittsburgh. They lost that first game of the doubleheader to the Brewers before winning the nightcap, and then they won a thriller there on Thursday before the 2 games. They had a modest 4-game winning streak after losing there yesterday. And now the Mets go on the road to Baltimore and then Kansas City. I believe it's Baltimore starting tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday, day off Thursday, and then into Kansas City over the weekend. And both of these teams have been wildly underachievers. We know about the Orioles situation. Last place in the AL East. Obviously did not get a lot of reinforcements over the winter. Not a lot of big-time pitching. They do have a good young lineup. But hopefully the Mets, even with their pitching in tatters at this very moment, but maybe they could hold that offense at bay and maybe pummel their pitching to the point that hopefully they could get back on the beam. And just like the Yankees, you want to win series here. Yes, it'd be nice to sweep the Orioles. Yes, it'd be nice to maybe even go to Kansas City and sweep them. But all you ask for at this present moment is just get 4 out of 6. Now, you don't want to have a situation where you lose 2 out of 3 and then sweep the other. You'd rather just win these series overall. But for the Mets right now, hopefully with this little stretch here, granted yesterday, all right, a hiccup, they lost, they didn't get the sweep. But maybe they'll feel a lot better about themselves going into this week, knowing that they're playing teams that beneath them, and hopefully they don't take them for granted and look at them as, it's the Orioles, it's the Royals, we'll just go out there and we should beat them handily. Don't have that mentality. Hopefully Carlos Mendoza got thrown out there in the 9th inning yesterday, now that I think about it, on 2 awful pitches back-to-back there on Luis Torrens in the 9th. But yes, you got to keep that pedal to the metal. Hopefully they could do so. The Phillies have a 2-game lead on them in the division, as I'm sure you know as you wake up this morning, as they beat the Reds 2 out of 3 over the weekend. So now let's see what the Mets will do here as they played a little bit better. Granted that their pitching isn't great, and even though they got some decent performances over the weekend, even Frankie Montas, give it up. Listen, nothing to write home about, but at least with the Met offense, they gave him enough of a cushion where he pitched 5 innings and gave you a little something, as opposed to 3 2/3, and he got hit all over the ballpark and walked the ballpark in the process. So that's your Subway Series there overall on a whole. And now as we move it along, the other big series over the weekend was out west. And I got news for you. Are the Astros going to be that dangerous that when we get to October, maybe they have another run in them? And this is without a lot of the players that they got rid of here in this recent offseason, whether your name is Kyle Tucker, whether your name is, now they got Christian Walker back, I understand that, but they had guys that were mainstays on this team that were out, gone. kaput. Even the Justin Verlanders of the world. So for the Astros to go into Chavez Ravine and sweep them handily. Now, 18-1 on Friday was something that nobody ever expected. That was the worst loss by the Dodgers at home in their history. Now, I believe they had a loss similar in Brooklyn, obviously many, many moons ago. But for the Dodgers to lose then, they lose a close game on Saturday before losing 5-1 yesterday. So the Astros go into hostile territory for them because obviously with the 2017 World Series, and although they've made visits to Dodger Stadium ever since that World Series, but that was one where the Dodgers had their head spinning. So Astros give it up, and as I mentioned, they have a 7-game lead, so they've gotten themselves a big cushion there out west. Now, do I trust them in the grand scheme of things? I can't say I do, because they've been unable to win playoff games at home, and we've seen this movie before. Now, granted, Yordan Alvarez, as I talked about last week, he has to see a hand specialist because he's had this broken right hand, which is not healed properly, and that's a big loss in the middle of that lineup, but they've been able to put it together to the point where they've had some timely hitting and some big-time pitching, and here they are at the top of the AL West, and I'm going to take a big, giant look at the standings, especially with the wild card. Now we can start to open that up as we're more than halfway, well past the halfway point of the baseball season, so I will touch on that in a little bit, but give it up toward the Dodgers. That was, to the Astros. That was a very impressive performance. And even if you'd be happy if they took 2 out of 3, especially after that blowout on Friday, but no, they took care of the Dodgers, dusted them off, and congratulations and kudos to them. So that was some good news there if you're an Astro fan. And also good news for the Brewers as they try to inch closer to the Cubs there in the NL Central. They get Brandon Woodruff back, who has not pitched in September of 2023 with shoulder issues. And what does he do? 6 innings, 70 pitches. So not only very methodical, but very economical. 8 strikeouts, gave up 2 hits, 1 run, no walks. So tremendous performance. I understand it's against the Marlins, but the Marlins have actually played pretty well here over the last few weeks. And they were actually in the midst of a rubber game where if the Marlins would have won, they would have won another series, and I believe they'd won 4 straight series. So they have been playing decent baseball, but for Woodruff to come back, has not pitched in almost 2 years when you think about it, and that is a big-time shot in the arm, no pun intended, for a Brewer rotation to go along with Freddie Peralta and the young kid, Jason Misiorowski. So you bring in Woodruff, and you add another arm there, and who knows? Let's see if they could at least get closer to the Cubs and make it more of a race there in the NL Central. So that's another thing I want to bring up. And then speaking of pitchers coming back is Yu Darvish. Now he had this elbow inflammation in his right pitching arm, and for him to come back and he'll make a start against Arizona at home tonight. And the Padres, obviously they're in the wild card mix. The division maybe not so much, even with the Dodgers faltering over the weekend. They still have a sizable lead in the NL West, but bringing in Darvish is going to be a huge boost to that rotation as they try to maybe even threaten the Dodgers as they get deeper into the summer, or at least be a part of that wild card mix, which we'll unpack there in a little bit. And then you had some house cleaning over the weekend in the nation's capital, and no, maybe not for some people. I'm sure they will look at it from a standpoint like, wait, what happened? No, we're talking about baseball here, not politics, as we all know. I'm not touching that here on this podcast as long as I'm running the ship. But as far as the Nationals, it was time. And it's sad because this national team I picked as a surprise this year. Not that they're going to make the postseason or be in the running for the wild card, but maybe they would have been a surprise where, hey, they could have been close to 500 or maybe just a smidge below that, but they have been anything but. As they're 37-53, they got very good young players on the team, including James Wood as an all-star slugger, going to be in the home run derby for those who care. And you got guys like Dylan Cruz, you got C.J. Abrams, you got an ace there, Mackenzie Gore, they got in the Juan Soto deal. But for the GM Mike Rizzo and for the manager Davey Martinez, they got shown the door, both out. I don't even know who the interim is, but I guess patience ran thin. They probably expected them to be a little bit better than this record as they're in last place in the NL East. And I understand competitive division when you have Phillies and Mets there. And the Marlins, like as I talked about, played better than the Braves. Braves have just been a disaster. They got swept over the weekend against the Orioles of all teams. And it looks like they're not going to fire at any cylinder this year. But for them to be in last place behind even the Braves and the Marlins, I believe the Marlins are in third place right now. So the ownership had no choice but to pull the plug on those two guys. So unfortunately, and I think maybe Davey Martinez will get another job somewhere along the way. But those two guys out, and that is just a tough break there for the Nationals as they try to put it together with their young core, young players, but it certainly has not clicked this year as their record indicates. And in some sad news, you had Bobby Jenks, the closer whose health had really come under just a terrible way here over the last couple of years, had this particular, which I can't even pronounce, but had this stomach cancer. And he was a guy that was on that 05 championship team as a closer, was on the team for 6 years, had another stop in Boston there, I believe in 2011, before he called it a career. But he had been living in Portugal, I believe, over the last year, and certainly his health had declined to the point where he passed away on Saturday. Terrible story, 44 years of age, very young. Had some very good years there with the White Sox, including closing out Game 4 of the World Series, which clinched their first World Series in 88 years. And was a guy that had a pretty good resume. I think he made a couple of all-star teams. And one more time, was a guy that obviously had a big arm, was a big guy too. And for him to succumb to cancer at the age, stomach cancer at the age of 44, thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Jenks family, the White Sox, Major League Baseball, etc. Terrible story. Too many deaths going on here and terrible tragedies. The flood in Texas. I mean, just awful stories about. But here in the sports world, losing a guy like Jenks, if you follow the sport, you know who he is. And unfortunately, way too young at 44. Now, as far as the standings go, and then I'll get to the schedule for this week or the early part of the week, before I get to the wild card, you can forget about these divisions right off the bat. The AL Central, I don't even think we're going to talk about it. Last, I believe it was, 11.5 what the Tigers were up. Now they have a 13.5 game lead, 13 up, and I don't think you can forget about it. And even the Tigers yesterday, who won against the Guardians, and the Guardians have now lost 10 in a row, so you can forget about them in the division, maybe even for the wild card, because I think they're 7 back as of right this very moment. And they won in extras yesterday to sweep the Guardians out of Progressive Field, or whatever the name of that stadium is, in Cleveland. But Tarek Skubal, 7 innings, 3 hits, 10 strikeouts. The guy's probably going to win back-to-back Cy Youngs, best pitcher in baseball by far. And the Tigers, as of right this very second, the best record in the sport. They actually have a 1-game lead over the Dodgers when it comes to records there overall in Major League Baseball. But you can forget about the Central in the American League. I'm going to say for right now, despite 6 in a loss and 7 in a loss, the Padres and Giants right now are looking way up at the Dodgers, despite them getting swept by the Astros over the weekend. So I'm going to say right this very minute, no worries about the AL West or NL West. And now to segue to the AL West, the Mariners, who are 7 back of the Astros. So I'm not even going to look at the Astros right now. To me, they got to get to within 3. Yes, people could say, well, what are they 5 back? What did they lose 2 games in those teams in those divisions? They get 2 games back and they're 5 back. Call me when they're 3 back. All right, because they got to be within at least a series sweep of them catching the AL and NL West leaders. So right now, I'm going to look at that at this very moment as those divisions, not over, but they're at bay to the point where I'm not going to really look at until I get to that 3-game mark. And I don't even want to hear it. Let's say by Thursday, if they gain 3 games, 4 back, all right, I'll bring it up, but I'm not going to look at it like, oh, wait, now we're going to have to really worry about the Dodgers or the Astros, or dare I even say the Tigers. So sadly, 3 of the 6 divisions are already taken care of. We know about the AL East with the Yankees, 3 games behind the Blue Jays, as well as the Rays, because they have the same exact record, Yankees and Rays, where the Blue Jays are 52-38, Yankees and Rays 49-41. And then in the AL East, as we talked about, NL East, I got my divisions all mixed up. Come on, JAYREELZ, let's get to it. Phillies 2 games up on the Mets there, and actually 2 in a loss, 1.5 back. And then the Cubs, 4 back, or 4 ahead of the Brewers, 6.5 are the Cardinals behind the Cubs. And as I talked about, the Cubs, who beat the Cardinals 2 out of 3, so they actually gained the game over the Cardinals throughout the weekend. And that's what you have with the divisions. So now as we get to the wild card picture, here's what we got in both leagues. American League, you have a tie with Yankees and Rays. So they're your 4 or 5 seeds, but I guess the Yankees have the advantage there with the head-to-head matchup. So if the season ended today, you'd have Rays at Yankees in Yankee Stadium to open up the wild card. And then you have the Mariners, who are one game behind both the Yankees and Rays. They're for the final spot in the wild card race. And then you have Red Sox, who are 3 back, 2.5. Rangers, 4 back. Angels, 4 back, but 4.5. 4 and a loss and 4.5 back. And then the Twins are 5 back. Now, I'm going to throw in the Royals at 5.5 and the Guardians at 7 and the Orioles 7.5. No, not now. I'm going to stick to the teams that are 5 games back. And, all right, you want me to throw the Royals at 5.5? All right, I'll throw you a bone there, Royal fans. But think, Royals are what? 2 games under 500? Actually, 5 games, and my eyes are deceiving me. 5 games under 500, and the Twins are 4 games under 500. But the only reason why I keep them in there because they're 5 back, and it's a disgrace that I'm even bringing them up because get to 500 first before I can take you seriously as a ball club that's going to be in a pennant race. But all right, as of right now, I'll be kind, although I mean I've been kind 5 seconds ago. But after that, I'm not going to get to the Orioles or Guardians. No way. Those teams are 7 and 7.5 back. That's what I have in the American League. And in the National League, Mets currently have the top spot, and they would actually host the Brewers, who they just hosted last week, as you know. Brewers are 1 game in the loss, 1.5 back behind the Mets for the 4th spot. And then you have the Padres, who are 3 back of the Mets, and 1.5 games, but 1 in the loss of the Brewers there in the 4, 5, 6 slots in the wild card race. Then you have the Giants, who are tied, but they're a percentage point behind the Padres at this very moment. Now, the Padres have 2 games in hand on the Giants, so keep that in mind as we move it along. So that's why the Padres are there. So for Giants, then you have the Cardinals, who are 1 game, 2 in the loss behind the Padres. Reds, 3 in the loss, 2.5 back. Diamondbacks, 2 games under 500, I might add. But they are 5 in the loss, 4.5 back of the not last place, but the 6th place and the final spot in the wild card Padres. Then you have the Marlins, who are 8 under 7.5. I'm not going to throw them in there. So that's what you have. Now, I'll talk more about the race or races a week from today because I can kind of do a little bit of an overview. I'll do a first half recap there next Monday as the All-Star break will begin. And then I'll do a second half analysis and forecast in my crystal ball what we can look ahead for the second half, quote unquote, of the baseball season. So that'll be the breakdown for next week as we conclude this final week leading into the All-Star break. And as you know, I'll be all over that. So that'll do it with the baseball. Let me see, anything else I need to add? I talked about Bobby Jenks, unfortunately. And yes, caught up on everything. All right, now let's move it along. Now I'm going to pivot and talk tennis. I'm breaking out the tennis racket, yes, because I could get into what's happening in the NHL and NBA, which is not much going on in the NBA either. But I have to talk tennis because that's the other sport that's happening here. And what I will say about tennis is this. Now, for the men's side, it looks like it's going to be inevitable, even though Novak Djokovic has played well here. And you got to give it up for what he's done. And chances are he's probably going to face off against Yannick Sinner yet again in a semifinal. Now, Sinner, who has been dominant here, he's played fantastic. And who knows? It'll be interesting to see if we do get the inevitable between he and Carlos Alcaraz yet again, as we saw in the French on the clay, but here in Wimbledon on the grass. So plenty of tennis to be played because Djokovic, I'm sure, is going to have a say in all this as we get to the latter part of the week. But right now, it's certainly looking like it's going to be chalk where you may get Sinner and Djokovic in your semis, and then Alcaraz, we'll see what's going to happen with him as we will get a breakdown here with the bracket on both sides and who's going to play who, etc. Now, as of right this very moment, today you have Djokovic, 3rd set, where he's facing off against Alec de Minaur, and they've split the first 2 sets. De Minaur won the first set 6-1, and then Djokovic came back 6-4, and right now the 3rd set's beginning. It's 0-0. So we'll keep that in mind, and I'll actually update everybody on the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. So stay attuned to that, where later on you'll get my assessment of that, and I probably should have that here on the monitor watching that, but that is not the case. So you have that going on. So a lot of people are going to look for Djokovic there, and Djokovic will go up against the winner. As a matter of fact, he already won, the Italian Cabali, who beat Cilic in 4 sets, including back-to-back tiebreak sets where Cilic won the first one and then Kobali won the second one 7-6, 7-3. So the winner of De Minaur and Djokovic will face off against Kobali, and then in the other bracket, you'll have Jannik Sinner go up against Grigor Dimitrov, and then Ben Shelton, the American, last one standing, will go up against another Italian in Sonego. So you may have another Sinner-Shelton match, which I believe they were in the quarters at the French. So you may have that going on there later on this week. In fact, that'll be Wednesday. And then in the other bracket, you'll have Taylor Fritz go up against Karen Khachanov, and then Cameron Norrie against Carlos Alcaraz. And then Alcaraz actually had a very good match against Andrei Rublev, where Rublev won the first set in a tiebreak, 7-6, 7-5, and then Alcaraz took over, winning 6-3, 6-4, 6-4, but very competitive. And Alcaraz has had competitive, unlike Sinner, who's been dominant. And Alcaraz is still here, so it's not as if he's been lacking, but he had that opening first set against the Italian Fognini, where he actually went 4 sets. I believe he went to actually 5th set, if I'm not mistaken, and he destroyed him in the 5th set, 6-1. But Alcaraz, as you all know, he's won Wimbledon here back-to-back, over Djokovic, I might add. So he's going for a three-peat here, and he's got Cameron Norrie, and who will face tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., and then you have Taylor Fritz and Khachanov. There will be the other bracket to where they'll face off in the semifinal. So we'll keep an eye on that as we get deeper in the week, and we'll see how that goes. And then on the women's side, is this going to be Aryna Sabalenka's tournament to lose? Now, there are a couple of players that could upset that apple cart, and I'm going to be interested to see how this is going to play out, where you had a ton of the top ranked players, as we all know, dating back to last week, whether your name was Jessica Pegula, whether your name was Madison Keys, who's ranked 6th in the world, whether your name was, not that she was top ranked, but we know Naomi Osaka. A lot of these top ranked women were gone. Elena Rybakina out, and Coco Gauff, who lost in the first, the number 2 ranked woman overall, first round, out. You had all these women's players just done before you even got to the end of the week, before you even got to any barbecues or fireworks or anything come Friday. But now you have Sabalenka, who won her match today, and she's going to go up against Sigmund. I don't even know I never even followed this woman. I don't even know. Let me just double check this here before I continue. Yeah, so she's going to go up against Laura Sigmund, who I've never seen play, and I'll take a peek at when they match up against one another tomorrow, 8:30 a.m., so bright and early, I could wake up, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to be up early. I got to take my car to get serviced, and maybe I could watch that on my phone while waiting for my car. Keep your fingers crossed, people. Pray for me that everything is all right with the car. I don't have to pay through the nose because, again, independent podcaster, content creator, trying to earn a living doing this, people. I don't have a steady paycheck, so hey, wish your boy some luck here. But with Sabalenka facing off against Laura Sigmund, and then in the other bracket, you have Amanda Anisimova, who is an American, and she's going to go up against, and I'm going to butcher this name, Pavlyuchenkova, who's actually played very well in this tournament. So Anisimova, who's ranked 13th in the world, but maybe somehow she could pull off an upset, get to a Wimbledon final. But Sabalenka, it is all right in front of her, because the only other 3 tennis players that I think that could really give her a run for her money are Mira Andreeva, Emma Navarro, who are going to face off against one another at 10:30, which is shortly. So one of those 2 are going to get canceled out. And then you have a woman who a lot of people, I don't want to say have forgotten, but she's laying in the weeds and has not played well on the surface throughout her career. And that's Iga Świątek. So Świątek, who is going up at 11:30 today against Towson. Let me see where she's from. So you have Świątek still alive, and you have Mira Andreeva, very good, ranked 7th in the world, and Emma Navarro, the last standing American. So let's see. No, you do have Anisimova, of course. But for Sabalenka, it is, again, in front of her to win this tournament as the top-seeded women's player in the world. But with Navarro, with Świątek, and even with Andreeva, but you know one of those 2 are going to cancel each other out. Let's see, as we get to Thursday, how far they're going to go. Now, I would think she's going to defeat Sigmund tomorrow, And then on Thursday, she's probably going to end up playing either Anisimova, who we would think will be the favorite to win that match. And then you have your championship, which could be against either, if you're going to go by the top-ranked players, Andreeva, Navarro, or even Swiatek. So not as compelling than the men's side, but we would think Sabalenka should cruise not only to a final, but win. But we all know sometimes in between her ears and even what's in her chest, that can interfere and get into her mood and affect her play. So if Siegmund or Anisimova or Pali-Kanchova, I know that was a bad one, they could certainly try to see if they could do their best to throw off the scent of the number one ranked player in the world. But I've been into it. I've been on top of it. I've tried to watch a little bit here, a little bit there. I know I haven't been dialed in, but now that we're into the second week of the tournament, you know I'm going to be locked in to find out how this is all going to unfold. And Thursday, we'll reconvene and see where we're at as far as the last men and women standing here in the third Grand Slam tournament of the year. And of course, with the last one being the U.S. Open, which will be later next month. So that's what I got with the Wimbledon. That's what your latest and greatest up to the minute. And remember, I picked Alcaraz to win a final. Who did I pick on the women's side again? I don't think I picked Goff. I may have picked Sabalenka. I didn't go Swiatek. I forgot. I know I need to write these things down or jot them down to make sure. Or maybe did I pick Madison Keys? I don't even think I went that far. But here we are. It's going to be fascinating to see if the number one ranked players in the world win, or will it be a situation where Alcaraz upsets Sinner, who is the number one ranked player in the world on the men's side, and should be the number one player if he wins this. Because, come on, if Sinner can't beat Alcaraz here and he's still number one after losing to him in the French Open, I know it goes by point total, etc. So we'll see what happens there. All right, now let me get to, this is going to be rather quick, people, with the NBA and NFL. NBA is super quick as I lace up the high tops. Now, I'm not going to get crazy about this Kevin Durant deal, which is now already in stone because the period for the free agency, we all know, started July 1st, but now with the quote-unquote basketball season, as far as these transactions and for it to be legitimate and for it to be official, I believe it was yesterday. So this Kevin Durant deal, I don't know if you were aware of this, but 7 teams were involved. That's right, 7. A record for an NBA trade. And I'm not going to break down the pieces. We know the big pieces that were involved. Durant going from from Phoenix to Houston, and then you had Jalen Green and Dylan Brooks and second-round draft picks going the other way, and then you had Brooklyn involved, Golden State, Atlanta, the Lakers. Who else? I think that's it. Houston, Brooklyn, Golden State, Atlanta, Lakers, Phoenix, Minnesota was the last team. So, yeah, that's what you have there. And then the Rockets, because of the Kevin Durant deal, and that's the only reason why I bring this up, is because they traded Cam Whitmore, a good young player, was a 2023 draft pick. What was he drafted? I think in the teens somewhere. And he's a guy that has tremendous upside. But with Durant going to be in Houston for at least a couple of years, and that's going to stunt the growth of Whitmore, now he goes to the Wizards for, I believe, 2 second-round picks? So they didn't have to give up a lot to bring in Whitmore, who now they can look at this guy as possibly a building block for bigger and better things to come there in the nation's capital. So Whitmore will be able to probably put up a lot of shots, try to make it his team. And not only that, he's a Maryland kid, so he goes back home, so to speak. I don't know how far outside of the nation's capital where he grew up there in Maryland. That could be a blessing, but also a curse, because as a young player kind of coming back home, distractions, family, friends, tickets, appearances, things of that nature, who knows how the kid will handle it, or it could be a boon for him to where he's back home, comforts. Yes, he'll try to block out those distractions, but he can just focus on ball, try to be a big part of a team that, as we all know, the Wizards have been basketball Siberia for ages. Maybe not ages, because they did have some success there about 7-8 years ago with Bradley Beal and John Wall. Got to a conference semifinal against the Celtics, if you remember. But for Whitmore, I thought that was a move that the Rockets, I guess they had to make, only because he wasn't going to get a lot of playing time and they were going to bury Whitmore on the bench. But now that's the Wizards situation to where, hey, they get a player that could certainly grow and develop, and hopefully they do the right thing by this kid to where maybe he could be a solid, if not very good NBA player, and maybe, dare I even say, borderline all-star? Borderline. I'm not trying to say pencil him in for the next 10 all-star games, but you have a scenario there in Washington where you got a guy that maybe you could build on, and hopefully with some draft picks, and we all understand they've been terrible with their draft picks, but let's see what's going to happen there. That's my NBA. I got nothing else to add because the Summer League stuff, I mean, what am I going to talk about there? How the kid that got drafted by Utah, Ace Bailey, how showed a lot of hustle, but certainly did not play well in his first game. To me, that's not even a story, so I'll pivot from there and lace up the skates, take a trip around the ice because the NHL actually had some big transactions over the last week, and the first one being the former Jet forward Nikolaj Ehlers as he goes to Carolina. 6 years, $51 million, and this is on the heels of them trading for Keandre Miller, the defenseman from the Rangers. So the Hurricanes, who, as we all know, as I've talked about a million times here, especially during this last playoff run, to where the Hurricanes have very good players, steady players, not spectacular. They have the four lines. They come at you in waves. And with them not having that star player, and Ehlers is a star player, maybe not a superstar amongst the top 10 in the sport, but they bring in a guy that is one that the opposition's got to pay attention to. And they need a player like this. Now, they could use a little bit more of a better player because Ehlers, I don't know if he's going to be the guy that's going to be able to carry you and score goals in bunches, although he obviously has a propensity to do so, but he is not that guy that is a game-wrecking force. But he is a guy that you do have to pay attention to, which is still an upgrade for a Hurricane team that has been just put out the pasture in these playoffs, whether it was the Panthers 2 of the last 3 years, especially in the conference final when they swept them 2 years ago, and then they beat them in 5 after a 3-0 series lead here in the conference finals just a month ago. And for them to not really get themselves that bona fide player, that star player, well, now they got one. And then with Keandre Miller to control the back line, they have made some moves. So the Hurricanes are going to try to go at it and see if they can get back to that same spot they did this year against a Panther team, as we all know, the re-signing of Sam Bennett, of Brad Marchand, of Aaron Ekblad. So you know they're trying to keep their team intact to go run it back for a three-peat there down in South Florida. So you got that going. Now, Corey Perry, who was with Edmonton the last 2 years, as we all know, has been a participant of 5 of the last 6 Stanley Cup playoff or Stanley Cup Finals losers. As weird as that sounds. Because remember, he lost the last 2 in Edmonton. He lost as a member of the Lightning. No, and not the teams that they went back-to-back. He lost when they, in a Lightning uniform, Colorado. And then I believe the Dallas the 1 year, and I know I'm missing another year. Dallas, the last 2. I think it's 5 of the last 6. Well, now he signs with the LA Kings. So who knows if the Kings have a long playoff run and maybe a Stanley Cup final is in order. But sadly, Perry has not been able to get that ring. Now, remember, he did win in Anaheim many moons ago in 2007. So he signs with the Kings. Speaking of the Oilers, they signed Andrew Mangiapane, who had a big year with the Flames a few years back, but has not played well here over a recent stretch. And for Mangiapane, he's a guy that, is that going to keep Connor McDavid happy as far as reinforcements, as far as a guy that when he looks past this upcoming year, is that going to be enough of a building block for him to stick around to sign that big-time contract? Because as you all know, he's a free agent after this year, and that's going to be the biggest free agent on the planet in any sport. I know Juan Soto last year, you could put him in that category, and he's actually better than Soto because he's won 3 MVPs. Granted that he has not won a World Series like Soto has, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. Edmonton's going to have to do more. Remember, they traded Evander Kane to the Canucks, and I get it. They had to let him go maybe because obviously he did not have a big-time Stanley Cup final, and maybe it was time for him to just part ways with the team. So I'm sure the Oilers have a lot of work to do if they want to keep Connor McDavid happy and obviously in the mix and in the fold with this organization for at least another decade. So they made a move. Was it big enough? I don't think so in my eyes. So you have that. And then the Avalanche, they signed Brent Burns to a 1-year deal, 40 years of age. Did win a Norris Trophy in 2017. So you have an elder statesman, veteran, longtime player in the sport, now going to add some help there with Cale Makar. So the Avalanche made a move there to bring a guy with some presence, won a cup. I believe, what year was that he won a cup? I got to go back and look at that. Let me make sure. Can't be inaccurate here, people, because you know me. I got to take a lot of inventory when it comes to me doing what it is that I do and being accountable and all that. And for him, Burns, yeah, he did win a Norris Trophy, as we know. Has played in 925 consecutive games. And you know what? I don't know if he did join the Avalanche, right? Whatever. I don't think he's won a cup. So you know what? I may have my players mixed up, so that's my apology. That's why I had to go back and look, people, because the last thing I want to do is give information that is erroneous. And obviously, he had been with the Kings for many... sorry, the Kings. I'm looking here. He had been with the Hurricanes over this recent stretch, as you know. And as I take a look here, just to confirm, he has not. Played a bunch of his career with the Wild, obviously with the Hurricanes, also played in San Jose. So he has not won a Stanley Cup. So I reel that one in, take that back. So let's see what he does there, as he's drafted going back 2003 and he's been in the league a long time. So for Burns, let's see how he does in Colorado. And then a couple other things with the NHL before I bid adieu. San Jose signs Dmitry Orlov, who I know won a Stanley Cup with the Capitals in 2018. And Orlov, San Jose, as they try to get an identity with the young players there, Macklin Celebrini, and he also drafted the second overall pick, Misa, there a week and a half ago. So San Jose drafts Orlov. And then lastly, some sad news. And this is, I understand, for the niche hockey fan. So what I mean by niche is, you probably never heard of this guy, especially if you're under 40. And when I bring him up, you're going to be like, who is this guy? That's why I say he's niche. Back in the 80s, when tough guys ran the roost, when you had 2, 3, sometimes even 4 tough guys on a team, and 2 bona fide heavyweights, and this was a guy that played in the Boston Bruins 8 years, teamed up with Jay Miller on those mid-'80s teams, and played on the 88 and 90 Cup teams for the Boston Bruins, to find out Saturday that Lyndon Byers died at the age of 61. And I get it. People, Lyndon who? What? Understood. But this guy, go to YouTube and type in Lyndon Byers. He had been a part of some big-time fights over the years, had that classic fight with Greg Smith, another dearly departed fighter of the Quebec Nordiques at the time. And this was a time where the penalty boxes, they didn't have glass over them. Think about that. This was the NHL back in the 80s. So Greg Smith, and it's spelled S-M-Y-T-H. So look that up if you're curious. He had a fight where he and Lyndon Byers fought, and then Smith, who tried to egg Byers on, they went over the boards and fought again. Where Byers beat Smith in the original fight, and then they got 5 for fighting, and then Smith is leaning over the board saying, come on, let's go again. And he went over, and I believe they did get suspended for that. If that happened today, forget about it. They'd be suspended probably 50 games, which would be stupid. But Byers, tough guy, also was in the local Boston radio market, had a voice there. The cause of death is unknown, 61 years of age. And here I was talking about before, Bobby Jenks at 44, and Byers a little bit older, as you know, 17 years older than Jenks, 61, and had great fights throughout the course of his career in the National Hockey League. Now, it wasn't an all-timer, but certainly when he and Jay Miller, he threw him with the best of them. Obviously, big-time reputation. Very sad to see him pass away. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Byers family, the Bruins, the NHL, etc. And what can you say? Another tough guy transitions to the heavens above. And lastly, and I'm bringing this up just for a hot minute because other than that, there isn't anything else to unpack. Yes, can I talk about Omar Khan as I put on the helmet and shoulder pads? Yes, I guess I could. 3-year extension with all the wheeling and dealing he's done. And if you haven't watched, last Monday I put up a commentary. Remember, people, I talked about putting up commentaries and critique videos. Well, I've done both. My commentary on who the hell do the Pittsburgh Steelers think they are, which has gotten, obviously, a lot of views. Very surprised to me. It's, I believe, approaching 2,500. Hey, for the little engine that could, that's pretty good. And I've gotten a lot of subscribers over it. So thank you to those who watched and who subbed. So I truly appreciate that. And in my commentary, before I get to my NFL comment, my commentary to my critique video, I was going to put it up Friday, but Friday was a little bit crazy. So early Saturday morning, I put up my very first critique video. And that's also gaining traction. So I believe I've gotten over 500 views on that. And this is based on Ashley Neville, who has her own channel on YouTube and is very popular with the NBA and an NFL player. Did a podcast with Shaq just recently, so that just goes to show you what she's done. And more of an independent like yours truly, so I can't knock her hustle. But she had made some comments regarding Damian Lillard, which to me were just off the wall. So I had to critique that. It's about a 7-minute video. It's funny. You'll get a kick out of it from some of the things that she said and some of the things I followed up with, and nothing personal. This is strictly business when it comes to breaking down and critiquing these videos. So if you think that I got it out for her or she dissed me or no, it has nothing to do with that. But I got plenty of those coming down the pipe. The commentary, I did a commentary on the new Knicks head coach, which didn't get as much traction or as popular, but that's fine. But check those out, people. So please stay dialed into this channel, subscribe because I got a lot of content coming down the way. But with that being said, as I wrap up, don't look now, because NFL training camps are not 3 weeks away. They're not even 2 weeks away. You could actually count on two hands, single digits, to where one team is opening up training camp a week from this coming Wednesday. That's right. You heard it right here. Because the Chargers are going to be the first team that will usher in, I believe, both rookies and veterans to camp July 16th. And then 3 days after that, you're going to have the Detroit Lions do the same. Where a lot of the remaining teams, the other 30, will open up camp anywhere between the 22nd or 21st and 23rd in that window. Because you do have some teams opening up the 21st, and you have teams opening up the 23rd where they're going to have rookies come in and then the veterans, etc. Think about that. Football's on the horizon. And I understand I'm in the big minority when it comes to this. We just finished the 4th of July. Summer officially started, 2.5 weeks ago? And now I got to start thinking about football? No way, shape, or form. I don't want to hear it. And I get it. People are going to be geeked up. Wow, training camp, storylines, what rookies are going to make an impact. Oh, is there going to be quarterback controversies? Oh, what's going to happen in Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers? Oh, what's going to happen here? Oh, what's going to happen there? Oh, NFL, I can't wait. When I saw that the Hall of Fame game was on July 31st, which is actually 3 weeks from this coming Thursday, because the reason why both the Chargers and the Lions are starting their camps early is because they're going to host the Hall of Fame game. People, I am not here for it. Wake me up. Not even September 4th. And I understand I'm going to have a football preview, and I understand I'm going to have to break down the NFL from soup to nuts, which I'm more than happy to do at that time. September 4th. Dallas at Philadelphia, where the Eagles will raise their second banner to the rafters or somewhere in the link. But come September 7th, I'll be ready to go. I'm not going to be ready. And think about that. That's actually exactly 2 months from today. Time, please. No rush. Take your time. No need to speed through the summer. No need to try to get to the British Open or the Open Championship, which I believe is a week from this coming Thursday. No need to get to the trade deadline or even the All-Star break next week. No need to get to the U.S. Open in tennis. Let's just take our time. Kumbaya. In through the nose, out through the mouth, because football season will be here before you know it. I don't care about the exhibition season. I don't care about the preseason. I don't care about what happens in those 3 weeks where the preseason schedule will begin, I guess, whatever, Thursday after the Hall of Fame game. I could care less. And I know there's football fans out there that are just like this. over a hot stove, ready just to sink their teeth into football. As for this guy, abso-flippin-lutely not. Right now, I'm immersed in baseball. Right now, I'm immersed in the tennis. Yeah, whatever NHL, NBA, free agency, trades, whatever news that's going to come down the pike, absolutely. But as far as the Shield, the impenetrable one, the National Football League, stay the hell all the way back until we get to September. And at that point, that's when I'll be able to open with big arms for an NFL season. Because as of right this very second, just to even think about training camp, as summer's just beginning, hell to the no. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of the toy department of life called sports. And one more time, people, please subscribe, rate, review. I've got a big boost from recent content, as I talked about before. With the subscribers, I'm over 670 now, so I'm less than 330 from that 1,000 subscriber threshold. So if you could do your part, subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, JAYREELZ.com if you like to listen to your podcast, or you can watch them on Spotify, but of course the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Take a screenshot, send it to your family, friends, foes, frenemies who are into sports, casual, die-hard, the kook like yours truly, the good sports fan in your life, and also the content, the commentary, the critique videos, lifestyle content. I'm in the midst of recording a vlog right now, so yes, keep yourself locked in on the YouTube channel as I'll continue to put out content, not only just on a daily basis, but weekly, monthly, etc. As far as questions, comments, suggestions, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, or on Instagram, just JAYREELZ. Twitter, JAYREELZ1, just the number. The old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, talking sports. I have not missed a beat since I've left corporate America on February the 6th, 2024. As I mentioned, independent podcaster, content creator, trying to navigate, carve, blaze a trail, a path in this podcast space to make myself a household name. The little engine that could, doing whatever it takes. Not only 2 podcasts, Monday and Thursday every week, a live stream every Wednesday, 12 noon here on YouTube and maybe even my social media platforms. On top of the critique videos, which I'm going to plan to do every Friday, although I know I put it up Saturday, but every Friday, commentary. Whenever the big sports story comes through the pike, I'm going to bring it up, strictly commentary with enticing titles, not clickbait, people. I'm not into the clickbait, as you know. So please do not steer away from the channel. Keep yourself tapped in, locked in, dialed in, because you know, as long as I'm alive and breathing, doing what it is that I love, in the blood, in the DNA, I will continue to deliver nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx, the South Beach, the South End, to the South Pacific, and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.